It's a war. Canada will never accept the Crimean annexation. Tough words for Russian President Vladimir Putin and the country's aggressive approach in Ukraine. Canada imposed a new round of sanctions against Russia just on Friday, another blow to a country already struggling with a sliding and collapsing economy. With oil prices tumbling, with the ruble at a record low, can Russia turn its economy around? And will more sanctions force it to change its position on Crimea? Or is more diplomacy the solution? Joining me now, the Russian Federation's new ambassador to Canada, Alexander Darchiev. Ambassador Darchiev, good to see you, sir. Welcome to Canada.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor for me to be here.
You arrive at a time of very low relationship between Canada and Russia. As you know, the last time Stephen Harper encountered Vladimir Putin, he said, "I guess I'll shake your hand, but get out of Crimea." Let me ask you, is there any possibility that Russia will leave Crimea?
Well, just answering your question first, Crimea is Russia once and forever. That's the one line. The other line is that, you know, there is no enmity to Canada in Russia. Whenever you say Canada in Russian, a very positive image comes to mind, which is freezing cold, which is vast territories, federation, and of course ice hockey. And you know, we have a very good relations. We have successfully engaged over the years in such areas as
let's focus
cooperation in the Arctic.
But the Crimea, I mean, listen,
Crimea is
you say it's Russian once and forever. That's not, Canada has already said, the Prime Minister has said, even if it takes 50 years, relationship between Canada and Russia will be cold because of what the United States, the European Union, the Ukrainians, and the Canadians all view as an illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia from the Ukraine. And you're saying that will never return.
You know, there is a definition when we call the people's will. We had a referendum.
This government called that referendum a sham.
96% of their participants, they have voted to reunite with Russia. To the best of my recollection, I haven't heard about the referendum in Kosovo, for instance. And so the people's will,
but
it goes in line with the UN Charter, which states the right for self-determination. So the people have their say in that process.
But you and I both know, sir, that the European Union and Canada do not recognize that referendum as a valid referendum that was forced upon them. There was already tanks in the streets. And so this is not deemed as a legitimate referendum.
Yes, we're living in a real world. We have disagreements with Canada. And it's not only Crimea. You know, there was a Russian-sponsored UN resolution condemning heroization of Nazism, on which Canada voted nine in a small company of other countries.
And I recognize that there's a lot of issues. Let me just focus on Crimea, because that seems to be the hot spot, which is Russia claims that now Crimea is part of Russia. Ukraine and the West say it's not. Let me just play it. John BAIRD, our Foreign Affairs Secretary, who I spoke with on Friday, and he announced new sanctions against Russia. And he called your country and the actions evil. Let me just show you what he said.
We can't accommodate evil. We've got to confront it. And that's why the civilized world is speaking with one voice strongly. Canada, the United States, the European Union are all seeking to get the Russian Federation to take a different course. One man in the Kremlin thinks he can redraw the borders of Europe through military force. That just isn't on in 2014. And I think cowering away from confronting that type of evil is just the wrong way to go.
Straight up comparison between what Mr. Putin has done in your country and evil. And he said that this is a unilateral redrawing of the boundaries, a violation of international norms.
You know, I should remind you that the boundaries were redrawn in Kosovo.
I recognize that there's issues there, but can we focus on, I mean, you keep trying to change the topic of conversation, but what about Crimea? That's the issue at hand.
About the Crimea is that the people had their say. They have voted overwhelmingly, 96%. It's very convincing, I should say. So Crimea is Russia. Of course,
but sir, do you believe it was a valid referendum? I mean, this is...
It was a valid referendum. People have their say. And I don't know, you could recognize it or not, we could fix these disagreements, but we have other issues on which we could cooperate.
But you
in
realize...
the interest of both countries and both nations, and we should do that. We have such things as the international terrorism, which is a common threat.
But sir, but people,
We have,
but I understand that, but you realize that Canada and the rest of the world, they see Russia now as outside of international norms because of Crimea. And then now Crimea has caused, and what's happening in Luhansk and in the eastern part of Ukraine, it has caused sanctions to be imposed and deepening sanctions. This at a time when the price of oil has collapsed, when your ruble has collapsed, your economy is now in free fall, there's no growth in your economy. In fact, it's going the other way. Why provoke this kind of response with the annexation of Crimea and what's happening in eastern Ukraine? This has been the question the West has asked of your country. What's the answer?
Yeah, you know, US and Canada is not the whole of international community. It's only part of international community. That's the one thing. The other thing, you can't isolate Russia, and the sanctions, they are both counterproductive, and sanction in itself, it hurts not only those who are under sanctions, but also those who impose sanctions.
Why? Why are they counterproductive?
They are counterproductive because they could not meet the intended goal. They could
Which is
not
what?
change the Russia's position.
On Ukraine? The sanctions won't make it?
On Ukraine, it doesn't change. It creates some problems for our economy, but you know, first thing is that the news of a Russian economic collapse are strongly exaggerated, I should say. Maybe someone would joyfully acclaim this result.
Nobody's acclaiming it joyfully, but your central bank raised the rate from 10.5% to 17%.
Yeah, but
the ruble fell to $55 a year.